Well, Grace, I've been wheeling and dealing so long today in the studio that I forgot I have not even ate. But that's okay. Why is that okay? Because the Brilliantly Dumb Show is presented to you by Postmates. For a limited time, Postmates is giving our listeners $100 of free delivery credit for your first 7 days using promo code BROBIBLE. $100 of free delivery credit with Postmates. Download that app now. Anything you need, anytime you need it, Postmate it.
We can get right rocking and rolling here.
Yeah, man, whatever you need. You just tell me and we'll do it.
Beautiful. Hey, Forrest, by the way, I think I have to go claws up here for the interview.
Oh, what a call. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think. Oh, you got the claw?
I live by the claw, brother. I live by it.
Let's go claws up, baby.
Cheers to that, man.
My guy. From one claw to another, Forrest.
Cheers.
Good to have you on, baby.
Always good. I just felt claw on my face when that opened, but totally worth it.
You got more in the tank?
Of course.
That's my guy. All right, let's get this rocking and rolling here, folks. Bringing back on to the Brilliantly Dumb Show, Animal Planet's very own host of hit show Extinct or Alive. Forrest, you're anywhere and everywhere. Did we not have fun on that first episode?
Oh man, it was great. It was absolutely so much fun, Robbie. You guys hung out. You got your cage rattled by the snake. We hung out here in my office. It was a great time.
And you know what? And like I told you before, what I was worried about, because you were coming off, it was a couple days after you went on Joe Rogan. I was so worried about the difference of questions because he's such a smart guy. Yeah. And then me coming on, I can't even hold the 1 to 2 foot snake.
Well, I didn't try and force Joe to hold any snakes either. So, I think
you were good about that.
Up on that one.
Yeah, you kind of guided the entire process too, what I liked. Forrest, we're quarantine day 7 now?
For me?
What day are we on that we got to stay quarantined? How long have you been in the house for?
Well, I got kicked out of, so I was just on an expedition in Indonesia, and I got evacuated from Indonesia, and I've been home for 6 days now in total isolation.
And what's a quarantine at the Gallante household look like? What does that consist of?
It's not too bad. I've got some space here, so I get up, have some breakfast, go check on the animals. I'll work out some way or another, whether it's run up and down the hill, or ride the Peloton, or do some push-ups or something. And then a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of keeping up with, I deal with various scientists around the world a lot and collaborate with them and coordinate with them. So this has given me some time to sit down and actually respond to emails and get caught up on some of the, I'm co-authoring some papers, so get caught up on some of our papers, and yeah, it's not too bad. I don't love it, but it's not too terrible for me.
You think even Forrest, the pigs and everything you got back there are wow, Forrest has really been around the house a lot lately. What's going on?
No, I don't think so. They're just happy that somebody's feeding them and out and about, whether it's me or anyone else.
They don't care who it's coming from?
They don't care.
Forrest, I asked you the other day, I DM'd you, and it's sweeping the nation right now. And for the listeners out there, I kind of gave them a preview for who hasn't watched the show. I don't know why you haven't. It's fascinating. What the fuck happened? Take me through you watching this new Tiger King Joe Exotic show on Netflix. What's going through your mind?
It is a bonkers show. So first of all, the host that you see a little bit here and there, Eric Good, you see him kind of come on and off camera. He's only there a very little bit. And one of the producers, James Liu, James in particular, is a really good buddy of mine. So I've known that they've been working on this for the last 4 or 5 years. So I've been getting little snippets, things that you're maybe not supposed to hear from James over beers, being like, man, wait till you see this thing. And I'm kind of like, yeah. I work in TV. I get it. And my mind was blown.
Did you binge?
Oh, I kid you not. James texted me, right? The guy I was just telling you about it, producing. Right. He texted me. He's like, Tiger King's out. Check it out if you like it. Give it some love on social. And I was like, cool, man. I'll check it out. I finished my dinner. I think I was watching Family Guy or something. I was like, all right, whatever. I'll throw it on. I started it at 8 p.m. at night. I watched all 7 hours straight. I did not stop. I literally went one after the next, binged the entire series. Could not stop watching it. It is so gripping. It is the worst type of people I've ever seen in my life. The wildlife abuse, it's just.
I mean, I would literally, I swear to you, Forrest, I would watch it, and if I went to sleep, the first thing I did in the morning before I even had breakfast was turn it on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So before you even got these clips from the producers, did you know who a Joe Exotic was or a Carole Baskin was before all of this?
So sort of. It's well known in my world. So I work in wildlife, right? I don't work in captive big cats and this like weird South Florida, Oklahoma space.
Stay away from it.
Yeah, that's not me. I've never known anything about it. That being said, some of the characters mentioned, Joe, Carole, Doc, some of these people, they're very well known in the animal world as, well, for lack of a better term, kind of being scumbags. Like they're known as this is Jerry Springer in the wildlife realm. Like it's just crazy. Yeah, and so my understanding was like, oh, big cat people are kind of shady. They do weird things. They're kind of cultish. But I didn't realize the extent to which it went on. I didn't realize there were murder scandals and all of the abuse that was taking place, and the fact that these animals are euthanized and hidden, and like some of the just horrific stuff that came to light in Tiger King, I had no idea about.
And with you being such a big animal activist and everything you do for the animal world, was it at times when you see these tigers in cages and other animals too, is it hard for you to watch?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you my honest feeling on it. I feel like most of those people probably started out with good intentions, right? Like they probably genuinely loved animals when they started. That doesn't mean that they're qualified to keep big cats. That doesn't mean that they're certainly shouldn't be abusing them the way that they are. But I feel like, maybe this is me being naive, I feel like they started with good intentions. Like they just loved big cats and animals. And then the money, the greed, the power, the fame, all that took over. For me to see because when you watch the show, right, it's not just big cats. You see chimpanzees, you see monkeys, you see a whole bunch of stuff. And you realize watching it that for the most part, and I will say this, I will define it's for the most part, because some of them seem like the enclosures were really quite nice. But for the most part, the way the creatures were treated they were just a means for income, and you see Joe Exotic scooping the tiger out with a stick from the mom as giving birth, the little cub, and some of these muddy, tiny pens. There's one shot near one of the last episodes where there's like 30 or 40 tigers crammed into a single like funneling pen. And, one of the rednecks in the background is going, we only got 2 pieces of meat for all 40 cats or whatever. And I'm just like, why are there 40 cats? Like, this is insane.
And you know what? To back off what you're saying, too, they even said, I don't know if it was the producer, whoever said that they think at first Joe Exotic, his heart was in the right place to start. And then as the money starts, they did, yeah. And then they said as it goes on, he completely loses sight of it and even the passion for it.
It does appear that way in the film. And yeah, but I mean, the short of your question, to shortly answer your question, totally. I felt really bad for the animals involved. And, taking all of the Jerry Springer-esque redneck craziness out of it, at the end of the day, I just care about the wildlife that's involved. And it seems like the wildlife is suffering, and it's suffering for income and entertainment. And that's awful.
And you can only hope that it kind of brings recognition around. I mean, with how many people are going to view this, Forrest, I'm watching this thing. I'm thinking of you the whole time.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
What I like about it is that one, it's gripping and it's fascinating. 2, it's exposing light on a terrible problem and just a terrible industry in general. But I think, for me, what's great is that like a company like Netflix is bringing wildlife conflict into mainstream media. We're talking about it right now. Everybody's talking about it, right? And that's important. Like in a time like this where zoonotic diseases like corona are running rampant because of wildlife mistreatment, that's topical. This Tiger King's topical. All these things that people I think brushed under the rug or didn't even know existed are topical and becoming mainstream. And I think that's really important for people like me to be like, supportive of that and say, look, this is great, guys. Like, here's what's going on. Here's the problem. You know, for people like myself who work with wildlife in the wild, in the field, it's really nice to see that there's light being shed on the dark places of the industry.
And speaking even with the dark places, this Carole Baskins, who also has her own, the zoo in her backyard, she's kind of in the show to start known as this, activist, and as if she's helping the animals. My question for you that I think a lot of people want to know, is she just as much to blame as Joe Exotic is? It doesn't seem like she's doing anything really different, no?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you're getting one side of the story, which is the filmmaker side of the story, right? But it does, it's Carole Baskins supposedly stands for not having big cats in captivity, and yet she has them in captivity. So it's a little bit bizarre in that aspect. She sort of starts out, to me, in the entire series, she starts out as kind of the heroine. And then as you dig deeper, you kind of realize she's perhaps just as bad. So it's, man, it's really complicated. It's really convoluted. It's hard to say who is right and who is wrong. I support the fact that we need captive species, right? We need them. Tigers are endangered and we're running out. I think Joe Exotic himself, and again, I'm clearly not a big pro Joe Exotic guy. He says, like, if the animals are disappearing, isn't it important that the breeders are here? Yes, but they're not doing it right. Do you know what I mean?
They're not going about it the right way.
Yeah, and you have to juggle all these balls. It has to be done right. You have to have captive breeding to ensure the species continues to exist. You also, much more importantly, have to have wild spaces and, conservation going on in the habitat that these animals are native to. So, you have to juggle all of this. But to me, it just seems like none of the people that I saw in that film cared much about the conservation of the species whatsoever. They just cared about a paycheck and being famous and their weird little internal war. So it's bonkers. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
It is. I did a article about it just on the last documentary I've seen that really, with that many different plot twists and everything, about totally something different, was Making a Murderer, where this show, it just has your mind, your brain just running in circles. I mean,
sure it does.
But my question, like, Forrest, when you see these guys in the cage and whatnot, you would think they're at even more risk with the tiger in there, but they don't seem to worry at all. Is it because they raise the tigers that the tigers know not to bite them or whatever? There's a couple scary close calls, but they almost seem comfortable in the cage.
Well, look, these animals are definitely hand raised by those keepers, by Joe and Doc and the drug guy from Miami and all these people, right? They're hand raised by them, so these animals know them. But if what are those two guys? Remember the two performers in Vegas that had the tigers and lions? Siegfried and Roy. If Siegfried and Roy have taught us anything, it's no matter how much love, care, and attention you give a big apex predator like these animals, there's still an apex predator. There's still a wild animal. Just because it's an animal in a cage doesn't mean it's not a wild animal. And I think you see that when Joe Exotic gets taken down, one's trying to eat his foot and he's shooting at it and stuff. These are wild animals. Like, are tigers adorable? Yes, look at them. They're gorgeous. They're stunning. Like, I want to play with a tiger kitten. I think everybody that watches this wants to play with a tiger kitten. But, and this is an important but, right? These are wild animals, and we shouldn't be playing with them. Doesn't mean I don't want to cuddle one. Like, I want a smooshy face and cuddle one like my puppy.
They are cute. They are cute, Forrest.
They're cute as heck. Yeah,
no doubt about it.
But these are wild animals, and Siegfried and Roy, Joe Exotic, all these people. The girl who lost her arm
and how about her just amputating that thing and just moving right along?
And to me, she was a good example of someone who actually cared about the wildlife.
I agree.
Even though she was stuck in a bad world. And, it was interesting. She said in the show, I remember this distinctly, she said, if I stayed in the hospital, it would draw more attention, negative attention to the wildlife.
Yep.
Excuse me. So I selected to have my arm amputated and get back out there. And it was to me, I was just like, that is nuts, But
unbelievable.
and this is coming from someone who cares more about wildlife than anything else, but she struck me as one of the lights of good in this kind of shadow of ugly. And
like you said, was just in a bad situation. You could tell her heart was in the right place, but she was just in a terrible environment.
So dinner time, Rob. What are you thinking?
Al, I actually think I'm gonna go with my 4th dish of chicken parm this week.
You're a chicken parmaholic, bro.
Can't stop.
Yeah.
And I can get it anytime I want, anytime I need it.
You can.
You know how?
No, tell me.
Using the Postmates app.
Oh, I love it.
From an early morning breakfast burrito to a bottle of wine after work, maybe that bottle of wine turns into 3 bottles of wine, Alex. You could Postmate some Advil, too. They do it all over at Postmates. For a limited time only, Postmates is giving our listeners $100 of free delivery credit for your first 7 days. To start your free deliveries, download the app and use code BROBIBLE. That's code BROBIBLE for $100 of free delivery credit with no minimum purchase for your first 7 days when you download the Postmates app. Alex, that's a lot of fucking bottles of wine right
And
there.
chicken parm.
And chicken parms.
A little bit of both.
Anything you need, anytime you need it, Postmate it.
I dig it.
And I think education's a big part of that, you know? Taking Joe, Carole, Doc, all these people out of it and just thinking, do they have any education? You know what I mean? Like, I don't mean have they got, degrees from Harvard. I mean, do they understand that what they're doing is actually wrong? Because I don't know the answer to that. They might not. They might think that this is how these species deserve to be treated in order to save them. Maybe the plight of the few for the good of the great, or for the greater good. I don't know how these people think because I can't relate to it. But I think once you've connected with these animals, once you've seen a tiger in Nagarhole, India, running through there, and I'm not, pretending by any stretch of the imagination that every redneck from Oklahoma can go on safari in India. But my point is, once you've connected with these things in the wild, it might take that kind of education or understanding to really realize that what you're doing is wrong. I don't know. It's hard for me to judge.
And you know what? He's clearly was such a head case that I don't really think there's any way of really knowing what was going through this guy's head. You know what I mean? It's just, he's clearly just, there's no sanity whatsoever.
Yeah, no, he's nuts. He's nuts. I mean, like, look, I don't want to start an enemy. I don't want death threats coming my way, but he is nuts.
Look, I don't think anybody can deny that. Whether you like him, I don't know how, but how could you deny that he's a nut?
He is. No, he totally is. They're bizarre people, and for me, like, it's hard to take the human element out of it because that show is really about the human element. But again, it just comes down to the poor animals that are caught in the crosshairs. When I watch Joe Exotic, I see someone who's willing to do anything for fame. That was what I saw from the singing to the running for governor and president, to the animals. It was the Joe show. It wasn't really a tiger show, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And I think that was the problem. That was the root of the problem.
Forrest, let me dig in a little bit deeper here, because when shit really hits the fan to me in this show is when Carole Baskin, again, who also is apparently this animal activist that has her zoo in the backyard. See the show, you gotta. But when some think that she had her husband murdered. Now, the theory of her throwing him into the tiger's cage is one that's out there. Is it realistic to say that this lady could, whatever she did to her husband, put him in a tiger cage and there could be no evidence of him in there? There wouldn't be blood or anything?
If he were chopped up, yes, it is absolutely plausible that he could have been fed to the tigers and every part of him could have been digested. It really is. That being said, it would have been very gruesome. If you throw a carcass in there, you don't get nothing, right? That takes an ecosystem. It takes the tigers to kill it, and then the vultures to pick it clean, and then the hyenas to crunch through the bone. But if you act as a catalyst to be the vultures and the hyena, and you chop it up into nice bite sizes, you give these tigers the pizza pockets instead of the whole pie, they'll just pop them down for sure, and that's the end of the evidence. So,
like their little Totino's pizza rolls or whatnot?
Yeah.
So that theory isn't, of course, it's bizarre to even think about. but that theory isn't ludicrous. It could be true.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
Insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. Now, these tigers, okay, so when they finally get free near the end, can you now put them back into the wild, or is there a certain process? You cannot.
For multiple reasons. So big cats have to, they have instinctual behavior and they have learned behavior, right? Learned behavior comes from their parents. These animals have no concept of how to survive in the wild. They don't know. They might have the instinct to kill a bird that comes into their habitat or something like that in the cage, but they absolutely do not know how to get put out into the wild, find and kill prey, mate with each other, and keep the gene pool alive. That's number one. Number two is we don't know what kind of parasites, diseases, things like that these animals being kept in quarters like that could have acquired that they could then pass on to other animals in the wild. Tigers are not supposed to be kept in packs or herds or whatever that giant clump of tigers in Joe Exotic's cages are. And when you put solitary predators like that into confinement socially together like that, you absolutely will cause diseases amongst the species, and those diseases could be transmitted to the wild population.
And so they just pretty much wouldn't even know how to adapt to wildlife at that point? Like, is it something you could rehabilitate, or it's gone at that point?
It's hard to say. I'm not a tiger expert, and each species is its own. Could you teach a tiger to be wild? Yes, I believe you could. I think you could take it out there, and it's a slow, lengthy process where they spend more and more time out in the wild until they don't come back one day, as opposed to dumping them out there. But you're still talking about flying a bunch of tigers to Asia, right? You're not talking. These animals will never go into the wild. No one is taking these tigers from North America, putting them on a cargo plane, and taking them to Asia. And it's delusional to think that might happen, because it just won't. There are tiger breeding programs where tigers occur, and Oklahoma is not one of those places.
Yeah.
So these animals are captive for life, and all those cute, cuddly kittens that you see being passed around for photos, those kittens will be captive. Those will grow into, if they're not murdered, as apparently some of them are, they will grow into adult captive tigers here in North America that will never see freedom.
Then, and with that being said, then, Forrest, there's theory that they had, killed some of the tigers. Why did they? Because it turns to the point where they can't be a show animal anymore? At what point did they decide to do that?
An adolescent of any species mammalian is rambunctious, right? When you were 13, I bet you were a damn nightmare.
You got that right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and if you're a 13-year-old tiger, you're a nightmare with Wolverine claws and giant fangs, right? So what happens is when these animals get to a size where they're not completely manipulated, where you cannot completely manipulate them to hand them over for a cuddle and a pet and all that, they become rambunctious, right? And that's basically them in adolescence. Well, if you're breeding hundreds of baby tigers for cute, cuddly baby tiger pictures, but you don't want hundreds of adults, what happens when they get to that adolescent stage, that rambunctious stage where they're clawing and biting and they're not controllable because the cat weighs 150 pounds? Well, it's from what the documentary said, and to be honest, I don't quite doubt it, that's when they get euthanized, because they've served their purpose of being the cute little picture animal. And that is absolutely awful and horrific. To breed these creatures for fucking Instagram photos and then put them down once they start reaching maturity it is criminal.
You're almost, I tell you, I was almost happy. I was happy to see Joe Exotic go to jail, but quite frankly, and this could be a hot take, I kind of wish Carole Baskin went to jail. I kind of wish they all do. Is it safe to say that at some point they're all at fault for this?
I feel like they're all living in the gray area of legality and ethicality, right? Like what some of them may be doing may technically be legal. It may also not be. It's hard to say, but it's definitely not ethical. And to live in that gray area between legal and ethical, to me, it's really shitty. You should do the right thing. Don't exploit wildlife for money. Like I can understand being passionate about tigers and wanting to work with them and wanting to live with them and maybe, you have it's a tough feedback loop, because maybe you have to do some kind of tourism the way the place in Florida does in order to finance the rehabilitation or the reproduction programs. But at what point does it just become showmanship and income versus doing the right thing? And to me, everybody I saw, maybe not the Miami guy, actually, the drug dealer guy, but everybody else I saw in that series seemed to just be doing it for the finance. And to me, it's awful.
Speaking of that, even Miami drug guy, how that guy only got 12 years for the shit he was pulling. Apparently, he won some appeal. I don't know what judge let that guy off with all the shit. He was drug trafficking through snakes.
Right. Yeah, no, it's bonkers. He was an interesting case. Like, I don't side with anybody I saw in that film, and I want to be clear about that. But of everybody, the lesser of the evil seemed to be him. Like, he was the only one that I felt, and maybe I'm alone in this feeling watching it, was like, oh, he's actually doing this because he just loves being around animals. Like, he wasn't letting people come in and see them. He had them in nice private pens. Obviously, he could afford that from his drug money, which is fucked in its own right. But it still seemed like he was doing it because he just loved being around animals. And to that, I can sympathize with. Should they still be kept in cages in a property in a drug dealer's mansion in Miami? Of course not. But I could still sympathize with the fact that it seemed like he was a guy who had a shady past, who was doing what he did because he absolutely loved being around wildlife. I could sympathize with that. The rest of them, I really couldn't sympathize with.
Is there anybody that you think has a tiger or these animals that is doing it the right way? And are they doing it the right way because they have more space and aren't bringing people in?
Oh, man, that's such a tough question, Robbie, because it's like, what is the right way?
Yeah.
The right way is for the animals to be out in the wild. The necessity for captive breeding programs to keep the species population up is there, and there's a right way to do it. I don't think that can exist in North America. And maybe this is where it's like, is this selfish of me to say this? Like, maybe this should all be happening in India and Southeast Asia and not here. But then how, we don't have the ability to oversee that. And why do they get the rights to do that over us? It's so complicated. Well, I don't know what the right way to do it is, and I think that's one of the problems and why there is this gray area that people are operating in, because who really knows what the right way is? We need the species to exist. They shouldn't be pets. We need to operate captive breeding programs in order to keep the species numbers up, because their habitat and their wild numbers are dwindling, but it shouldn't be happening with rednecks in Oklahoma. So it's like, zoos are probably, and this is probably not going to be a popular opinion, and I'm sorry to people that get offended by it, but AZA accredited zoos, American Zoological Association accredited zoos that people have gone in, they've checked the facilities, they've said you have all the right vet staff, you've got a nice enclosure, there's BE, behavioral enrichment for the animals, there's a breeding facility, and the cubs go somewhere important, whether that's to diversify the gene pool at other zoos or back to their native habitat for reintroduction. That's the right way to do it, right? I don't think people, and I love pets, that. I've got all my rescues, but
More
I don't
than
think
anybody I've ever met.
Right, and I don't think I should own a tiger. Would I like to, on a personal level, have a tiger to play with? Of course. Like, that sounds awesome to have a tiger. Should I have a tiger in Santa Barbara, California, in a cage? No, I should not. That shouldn't be allowed.
But then with that being said, what do you now do? And going back to the tigers that were freed, what's the proper play for the tigers that were owned by Joe Exotic now, that were living in these harsh conditions? How do you now, what's the play for those tigers now?
Well, if I remember correctly, the series ended with that one like shady Vegas guy potentially building a new zoo and then having a falling out with his partner.
Yeah, not a fan of him, by the way, either. Another friggin' wacko.
No, yeah, and seemed really willing to burn bridges and just be a bad person. But
character.
Yeah, really shady. But your question is, what's the play for those animals? I don't know. I don't think a wildlife biologist like myself should ever say there's too many tigers, because there really shouldn't be. But it almost seems like there's too many tigers. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do with 100 big cats in any facility? Like, it doesn't really make sense. It's not balanced. There's too many of them. There's not enough other things. It's a privatized zoo, but then you cuddle them, which is not good for the species.
Pictures with them and
yeah, and like I want a picture with a tiger. Like they're amazing. You know what I mean? But
and they are cute.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can't support that. So I just think it boils down to education. Like people need to understand that this is wrong. If I was not a biologist or not someone that worked in wildlife or not educated or just a 13-year-old kid who wanted to go see a tiger, and I saw a billboard that said "Come and cuddle a tiger for $15.99,"
you're taking that exit.
Of course. And that comes down to a lack of education and understanding, right? You're taking that exit because of course you want to go cuddle a tiger. It's a freaking tiger. But it doesn't mean that it's good. You know what I mean? And that's why it's really complicated.
Let me ask something, Forrest. If you could actually go in there and they chose you from a more bizarre standpoint, let's say they chose you to go help out these animals, would you have any issue? Would you be able to go in one of those tiger cages? Lord knows I wouldn't, but would you be able to go in there?
I wouldn't. And it's not because of fear. It's because those animals don't know me, and you can't just go marching into a tiger's enclosure that you don't know. The only reason Joe Exotic and the various keepers could do that is because those animals knew those people.
So they do come accustomed to them?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. There is imprinting that's taking place. And even though in some cases it seemed pretty abusive, those animals still knew their keepers enough to let them come in. If you or I walked into an adult tiger's habitat pen, there's a very, very, very high probability that you would just be killed or attacked or played with because they don't know you. You're a threat to their habitat versus a keeper who they socialize with daily or weekly, they know.
It's to be honest, Forrest, it's kind of like your pigs and turkeys and all them. They didn't know what to do when they saw me. You walk through, It's just another day.
Yeah, no, well, that's the thing, animals definitely, even the term bird brain gets thrown around a lot, but even birds, they imprint on people. They know people. They know your smell, the sound of your voice, the way you move, your body language. And when a foreign presence comes in and invades that, it is threatening to them.
Well, I tell you, and you had mentioned it before that although as terrible as it is, I guess the one silver lining to it is now it brings attention, throughout the U.S., throughout the world,
Absolutely.
Of people doing this. And if there's anybody that, again, I'm watching this thing and I was thinking about you and just how upset you had to be watching this, knowing your love for animals. I mean,
even with my knowledge base and my love for animals, I found that really enlightening. I had no idea that it was that bad and the problem was that severe and there were people like that out there. I really didn't. I mean, we all know that there's animal abuse taking place every day. I had no idea it was taking place, in our respective own backyards at that level.
Forrest, I'm telling you, and I'll wrap it here. You probably think I say this to everybody. Me and Joey Coldcuts coming to your house that day was one of the most fun I've had on the podcast. We just had an absolute ball, and I'm so happy that you could come back on here. Claws up for Forrest. I'll go ahead and throw those up right there. Let me tell you something, Forrest. Anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome on the Brilliantly Dumb Show.
Oh, thanks, brother. I'd love to have you back sometime. We'll barbecue and hang out and, put some more snakes on your neck.
Yeah, I was just going to say done deal. I take that back.
Yeah. All right, Robbie. Thanks so much, brother. It's great to see you.
Buddy. Take care, okay?
See you, man.